Yay, I'm back.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. I need to go over to YouTube for a minute and make sure everything's streaming through to there. But while I do that, maybe Kyle can introduce our guests.
Today with us, we have two very special guests. We have Rad and Viola. They're going to be talking about some content stuff. I've heard of Viola speak on content stuff maybe 5 or 6 times now. But we were just talking about the last time that we saw each other was in Milan, and in the Milan Marketing Summit, Business Marketing Summit. I realized that was probably the epicenter for COVID, and I probably personally brought it back to the United States and caused all of this to happen. Because shortly thereafter, I saw TED, and then TED took it right up to Seattle. I figured the whole thing out.
What a great introduction to this webinar, Kyle. Just a little bit of gloom and doom out of the SEO community.
Just got to get it out of the way. I appreciate it. Now everything else is a positive.
But it's true to say we met in November in Milan, and a few weeks before we met in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and that probably were some of the last kind of like big conferences and big travels, and then nothing really happened this spring or summer so far except online events, obviously.
Yeah, 2 things that I was going to speak at became digital events, and then everything else has been canceled, except DMSS. I think they're going forward. Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't really know. I have one other thing in the end of the year, which is a spectacle for the solar eclipse in Argentina in December. And they now started sending messages that it may or may not happen also. So that was out of probably 10 events that I had scheduled. That was kind of like the only one that left. So I think we have to take it week by week also with the events and whether we can be going. But fingers crossed, stuff can happen and DMSS can happen and the solar eclipse can have their festival, etc.
Yeah.
So I saw Clint pop in. I think he's feeling shy. But Clint, why don't you tell us what's going on with SEO this week quickly before we start today's topic? Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
This week we had Marco Benavides on, and we talked about the power of masterminds and he went from 30 years of being a programmer to a solo SEO to joining a mastermind and actually turning it into a pretty large business for them when they combine their efforts. So it was a good talk.
Very cool. So with that, today's topic is one that I have been trying to wrap my mind around for years. We have a lot of testing in this area, but I can't say we've solved this problem space of crawl budget and index management. And especially since it appears like Google kicked off an update just on Monday and people are complaining about indexing issues, I think this topic is really relevant to, right now, today. So I'm excited to hear this, and this is going to be amazing. So with that, I'm going to turn off my camera and microphone, and I'll let the presenters share their slides and take control.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Ted. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks, Kyle, Clint, for having us. I think it's super excited. Okay, I see we're down to 2. So my name is Viola. With me, I have Red. And basically today we want to talk, as Ted said, about index management and crawl budget, but kind of like the background that we two have is radically different. So we're both SEOs, we both work for agencies, we both work on a bunch of sites for a bunch of clients. And I think we very much agree on the things that matter for SEO. However, we have a totally different background, a totally different worldview. And Red is definitely on the more engineering side, on the more technical side, on the side of things that sometimes I can barely understand. And I'm definitely more on the marketing side of things, on the content marketing side of things, and on the psychology that goes into creating content that is relevant. So for today's presentation, we split our talk into two parts, where I'm going to talk first about the more psychological woo-woo side of things, like the side of things that SEOs tend to ignore, that maybe we've been forced to think about a little bit more as we talk more about search intent and meeting search intent, but before we maybe didn't care that much about it. And then I'll hand over to Red to talk a little bit more how Google as a text-based crawler actually determines text and content and what should be indexed and what should not be indexed, and how you can make sure that the right type of pages appear. So this is the story for today. And then I will start by sharing my screen and then turn off my camera. So let me see. I'll share my screen. I turn my camera off. I hop into this. So Ted, Kyle, if for some reason we are not seeing the slide deck right now, feel free to interrupt me right away so we can make sure that we have it sorted. Nice. So yeah, basically I said this. So my agency is called Flow SEO because I'm very deeply inspired by flow states and altered state of consciousness. And I have this weird tagline that I'm equally interested in data-driven SEO as well as mindful entrepreneurship and marketing. And that's probably the weird paradigms that I'm trying to unite in my person. And basically the side of how do we actually market within SEO is something that I quickly want to address today. So to bring it back to the 101, we're successful SEOs. If we're on page one, we get the organic traffic, which means that we're the most relevant answer to a search query. So in order for Google even be interested in us and crawling our site and indexing our site and ranking our site, we have to be a relevant answer to a search query. And relevance and focus is the first concept that I want to talk about in order to talk about crawl budget and index management. Because the entire goal of all of our activities are creating relevant and focused pages and content that are worthwhile for Google. And kind of like the psychological background of this is, as I said, is search intent. Search intent is this kind of like nebulous term where we try to assess what do people really want. Search intent is why people search on Google. They don't search on Google, because it's so fun to click around and be on websites. Is they have a certain need, they have a certain pain point or perspective or motivation. So search intent is why people search on Google. However, understanding search intent is one of Google's main objectives. And the way we as SEOs most commonly think about this is we only think about the search query, about what people type into Google. And I want to talk a little bit about the gap between why people search and what they type into Google. Basically, they have a more sophisticated, more broad motivation, and they have to break it down in order to feed the algorithm. And I always put up this slide, which I normally call like holistic SEO success, where I talk about what do you want to communicate, what people are searching for and why, and what Google favors. And normally when I give a presentation, I very much focus on the what Google favors part, which has a lot to do with the fact that Kyle and also Ted have been my mentors and have largely influenced how I see SEO. So what I normally do is I teach people how to pay attention to different ranking factors, how to use their tools in order to understand how they should be optimizing, how they should be reviewing page one and doing something that is, competitive with it. But since you guys are all on the show, I kind of assume that you were across some of the research and things that the guys are doing. And I want to focus on a different aspect today. I want to focus on what people are searching for and why they're searching for that and why we need to pay some attention to that. I'm going to say the kind of like unholy word that we like to ignore as SEOs very much, which is customer development. We often think about keywords, but we don't really think, as I said, about the search intent and why people search, and we don't think about what type of people search. So I think to make our keyword research and our keyword selection a lot more tangible and to increase our chances of success with doing something that is relevant, I would like you to think about the classic customer persona, target audience, like who are you actually trying to reach? What is actually the customers and clients and services that are interested in your website? Why would people come to your website and what type of people are they? And normally when we think about customer development, we think about demographic characteristics. We think about, are they men or are they women? What is their age? Where do they come from? And this is also basic stuff that you can see in the Google Analytics demographic report. But if you want to be very accurate, I would like to go beyond that. And you can see that even Google Analytics has expanded in the sense that now they cluster the people that come into your website into types. So when I check the traffic of my own website, Flow SEO, I will see that most people that come to my website, sure, they fall into a certain age bucket, but they also fall into a bucket of people that are interested into SEO, that are interested into marketing. And these kind of like information, kind of like the social and characteristics, will help us understand what type of content we should be creating, what we should be writing for, and what are topics and keywords that we should be using. So basically, I want you to encourage turning your keyword research and things you do for SEO upside down. Instead of starting with keywords, I would like you to start with your target audience and what drives them, what is their motivation, and what are their pain points. And some of the ways you can obviously figure this out by surveying your customers and followers and figuring out what they like and what they do. You can figure out where do those people hang out and what do they talk about? What do they talk about in Facebook groups and online communities on Reddit, etc., and use that as a foundation to map their needs and pain points. Because that will help you to understand the search intent. This will help you understand what type of topics should be covered to be relevant, and then also which kind of like search queries and keywords you should be using. And then also with that is, because I'm already showing kind of a funnel, but the funnel that I showed just now with the wonky graphic is a funnel of how people make their decisions and how you can be thinking about what people want. The other marketing funnel is obviously the question on how do you convert a visitor into a purchaser or buyer. And the reason why I want to bring this up now is that you're going to start realizing that a lot of topics and keywords that we usually talk about with SEO are very much in the awareness and consideration phase of the funnel. So if you're lucky and, for example, you're an e-commerce store and you have category pages that you're optimizing for Blender or Blender of a specific brand, then yes, that's a very transactional keyword and you might be able to generate direct revenue from your SEO articles, from your category pages. But in many cases, if you have a website and you sell blenders, you will have a bunch of articles around which is the best blender to juice, recipes for green juice, recipes for juicing, recipe for green juice with spinach, all the good stuff. And with these things, it's normally not as clear on, they're good in terms of like the keyword research. They might have good low difficulty, and that's why we chose them. But it's actually not as clear as we would like to think to translate these content pieces into revenue for your business. So one thing that I started to understand when we talk about demand gen and meeting search intent and doing something that our target audience likes is that for a lot of these like top of the funnel SEO keyword articles, what we're really looking is to gain signups, subscriptions, white paper downloads, webinars. Often it's a longer path to conversion, and we can't be sure that our more educational or informational content straight up leads into sales. So again, I want to talk about who are the people you're interested in, what do they care about, what are they researching, and then what can you give them as that second click, as that second interaction, as a means to terminate their search. So if you do give them the smoothie recipes, is there like a PDF download that could go with this? Is there a video that could go with this that moves them further down the funnel?
Viola,
yeah.
How do you handle the types of niches where the people who are selling the product or service are selling something that the world doesn't know about, or it's technical jargon? For example, on Clint's show last year, we did an audit of this small business that sells artisan wine boxes. So they create a custom wine box so you can give a bottle of wine that has a nice message or sentiment on it. And the problem with his business is his customer, people that need wedding gifts and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a shout out to Scott Rogers. That was his site review. People who have something like that, their target customer is often like, you know, people that have weddings and need wedding gifts or anniversaries or special occasions, and those people don't know to search for custom wine box. So the keyword custom wine box is a bad keyword for them. How does this relate to those types of issues?
Agreed. So firstly, I think it's probably still worthwhile for him to have a product page, a category page about custom wine box, just in case someone like randomly types this in, he should probably be there. Then, to be quite frank, in this kind of situations, I'm often more of a marketer than I'm an SEO. So when it comes to gifts, to kind of like random items like this, it's like one thing I would try is probably social channels like Instagram, Pinterest, even paid ads, etc. So as a marketing strategist, I would say, okay, you need to test other channels. So that's kind of like the preamble. If we do think, okay, SEO is the way to go, I think you said a lot of nice things there. You said gift guides, gift for anniversary, gift for corporate event, gift for wedding. So I think these are good keywords. The thing is, he probably will have to write listicle articles. I would assume page 1 is full of the 20 best gifts for weddings type listicle articles. So he will probably have to create listicle articles, also mentioning other gifts, and then have his within. And then probably I would see if he can find keywords around gifts for people who love wine, and then maybe some keywords around different kind of like styles of wine or wine equipment and that kind of stuff. So I'd probably start with these type of keywords. And I don't think there is a way around mentioning contextually related products and gifts around wine, to be honest. What do you think, Ted? What did you recommend him to do?
Those things, you know, it's a common pitfall where businesses pick a keyword that is so technical that they're all know about it. Like one customer was doing pink ribbon bracelets, and they did pink ribbon pave bracelets, which is a technical term to the style of the bracelet, and nobody searched for that.
Yeah.
So when I downgraded the specificity of their term down to pink ribbon bracelet, then all of a sudden they started getting organic traffic. So it's a double-edged sword. Like if you're too general, like bracelet, you'll never win the keyword. But if you're too niche, you'll never get any traffic. It's kind of like you have to dial into where the traffic is, where the opportunity is.
I agree very much, right? And you don't want to be too far off, because you could do, maybe you can do something like Valentine's gift or so for the guy with the wine boxes. And of course, someone can give a wine box for Valentine's, but it might be a bit like an unusual choice compared to flowers and jewelry and that kind of stuff. So I think for him, maybe a sweet spot is around gifts for people who like wine, gifts for people who are passionate about wine, like that kind of stuff. But I think you have the right point there, because it's like, how far up the funnel also do we go in terms of the interest that people have? I think actually with the ribbons, maybe it's I actually don't know what it's good for, but maybe there's some stuff around DIY or fashion or anything like that, where the ribbons are coming into place. Or if they use that wedding ceremonies for like decorating, maybe you can do some like decorating guide for like weddings, etc. But it's a fine line between going up enough the funnel to actually have an audience and still being relevant for your product. But that's where I think this is why a lot of SEO content, if you look at big websites that have a lot of SEO content pages and have a good content marketing strategy, most of the time they won't drive you straight up into the product. They will drive you into a webinar, into a white paper, into a download. So, and then try to convert you from there. So oftentimes the SEO content is a mechanism to get more email subscribers that then later allow you to make more sales. And you have to figure out how those steps look like. But honestly, with everything gift-like, I would like to recommend the guy to look at a social paid ad strategy and at Pinterest and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you made a great point with the educational offerings leading into a webinar. Like my product, I'm known for Quora SEO software, but it's so complicated, you can't convert with it with a banner ad. That's not how you sell Quora. I have to offer webinars. I get people into webinars where I can spend a half an hour educating them because it's an education problem. Then people are like, oh, I understand what problem this solves. And yeah, you got to understand the problem of the offering, whether it's, prices, what is the issue, or education barriers or things of that nature.
And you need to understand.
Ted, there's also.
Oh, sorry, Kyle.
I'm sorry to cut you off. There's also, Ted, your concept. It's like my favorite example ever of the custom poker tables. That nobody knows to search for that, but what people do know are gifts for dads, or man cave gifts, or stuff like that. So you start optimizing for pages that go for the man cave, and then you give the suggestion of this is a thing that can go in there, because people search for that concept, but they don't necessarily know that the custom high-end poker tables exist.
Exactly, they're trying to solve a pain point or need, right? So also, there's probably not a ton of guys that look for like correlational SEO software, but there's a lot of people who are trying to research what to do after an algorithm update, how to review your competitors for SEO, how to optimize your content for SEO. So those are all related questions that they have that ultimately can lead them towards Quora. Right, I'll quickly see. Yeah, nice. So I said focus on what matters, right? So we want to go up the funnel enough to even have some topics and keywords that we would like to write about, but not too far so that it's not relevant to the needs and pain points of our target audience anymore. And then basically, so I'm not sure if Kyle and Ted are going to be offended by this, but I'm going to be bold and I'm going to say, in order to manage your website well and have a well-organized, well-structured website, I encourage you to write about topics and not keywords. And what I mean by that is I think a topic is the missing link between what people type into Google, the keyword, and their search intent. And the point basically that I want to make is that we want to be optimizing each page for one topic, which probably has a main keyword and a variety of supporting keywords and synonyms. But basically, I like to think about content writing more about creating the best piece about a topic that makes my target audience happy. And then I think about it from that editorial angle on top of thinking about it in terms of like tweaking keywords, etc. And just to bring that example that I always like to show, this is one of my favorite articles. We can see this one is an article that's been ranking like super well. It's been ranking for years. It has like very many keywords on page 1. And it's one actually perfect example of funnel is from the website Toggle, with which I have no affiliation, but I can really recommend you to check them out because they do really good content marketing for SEO. So I recommend that you put them into a Ahrefs. But what you can see is they have an article about time management tips. They're a tool that helps you to do time tracking. So there is a relationship there, and it makes sense that they would talk about this topic. And you can actually see that the article about time management tips ranks for all kinds of like synonyms and variations around that. And they're all covered within that same page, which is part of focus, part of relevance, and also part of being the best answer to that search query. And actually, Red will talk a little bit about this a little bit more in terms of why does this work and why is it useful for Google to cluster and rank content like that. Basically, in order to be like a little bit practical, is the way I like to think about providing information and managing my website is exactly that. Is I don't want to create a new page for every single keyword. I'm mainly looking to create evergreen, in-depth content that covers all the variations and synonyms. And then basically what I do is I create one page per topic, and then I obviously look on page 1 and I use tools like Page Optimizer Pro or Quora to understand what should I be doing, what type of content should I be writing, what kind of word count, what should I be doing in terms of like on-page SEO, what are subtopics that I need to cover within this article, what are subheadlines that the competitors are using that I should be using too. And being really strict with this is kind of the main thing that I'm working on with clients, which is either eliminating thin or old content or spicing up content that they already have or migrating several pages into one. And this is kind of like the psychological side of, I would say, managing your index, is that if we follow classic content marketing goals and we have a goal like publish 3 blog posts per week, we tend to write about the same topics over and over again, and we answer them really shallowly or unwell, and they're all competing with each other. So the main thing that I'm working on with clients is like consolidating content, doing a very clear cut keyword mapping, very precise, this is our page, this is the topic, these are the supporting keywords, and then making it really, really good. And basically word count, content type, on-page SEO, they're our estimations for meeting search intent, because we can assume that Google has put on page 1 what they deem to be the best answer. It's already on page 1 what Google thinks the user wants. So if we can meet something that is comparable with this, we already have the right thing. And it kind of alleviates us from the pain of constantly having to write more and more content, and we can focus on making those pages that we care about really, really good. And to kind of like wrap this up really quickly and kind of like lead into the next thing is like, I'm the biggest fan of content auditing and content pruning, and increasing focus on relevance like that is probably the main activity that I do. And generally speaking, what I do is like, most pages fall into 3 buckets, and we want to keep the pages that have organic traffic, because having organic traffic basically means that they have top rankings and good backlinks. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on page 1. We will have some pages that are stuck awkwardly on page 2 and 3 and 4 that have some links. They are the ones that we want to be improving. And then we will have a bunch of stuff that has no organic traffic, no backlinks, no keywords ranking. And that's just bloating up our website. And these are stuff that we would like to de-index or remove. And to bring it back to the kind of like woo-woo psychological side of things, if you do have organic traffic, you can be pretty certain that you have met search intent and that you have a good quality article, because that's why it's on the top. Whilst oftentimes the stuff that it's on page 2, 3, or 4 just doesn't serve the type of content that Google would like to see. So maybe you're trying to rank a blog post when page 1 is full of category pages, or you're ranking a blog post that talks about topic A but totally ignores topic B, whilst everyone on page 1 is talking about topic B. So these are the pages that we would like to improve. And then, yeah, I'm a big fan of content pruning, getting rid of old, outdated stuff, event updates, press releases from 5 years ago, empty WordPress archive pages, author archives of people who are not in the company, etc. anymore. So I like to be quite rigid in getting rid of all of this stuff and making sure that we only leave what's relevant and interesting and helps us to achieve the goals that we're looking to achieve, which is that every thing that we do, every page, every article that we create is something that's relevant for the target audience.
Yeah, there's another way to kind of look at this slide.
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to put it back on? I was going to like... I was like overly enthusiastic putting my face back, but I'll put the slide back on.
The other way to look at this slide is that you kind of want to look at a website and identify what pages on that website are not performing organically. The goose eggs, yep. They get 0 visitors. Yep. And then there's a question of what do you need to do with those pages? Because sometimes you can't get rid of them. They're product pages, and the business needs to sell that product in order to recoup their investment in it. So in those cases, I like to call it, find the goose eggs on the website and take those zeros and make them non-zeros. And what that means is you need to tune that content until you get those pages to be top 100 for their keyword. You're not talking about getting to page 1 or top of page 1. You're talking about getting a page actually into the top 100. So now maybe it gets 5 visits a month. Nothing mind-blowing. But if 20% of your traffic is coming from 5 pages and 80% of your pages are all zeros, if that other 80% all of a sudden gets 5 visitors a month, you might have just doubled the business with the easiest SEO problem in the world. And so just because getting those zeros to be non-zeros doesn't feel like a big victory, you could quite possibly double the income of a business by doing those easy problems. And you get those pages into the SEO game. And I really like how you started this section where you were worried if Kyle and I would object to it. I don't. I think you're exactly right. You tune your pages for algorithms, and the output of that process is traffic. But for a business, the job isn't done. You need to convert that traffic into sales. So SEO tuning produces traffic via rankings in Google and keyword reach in Google. But then quality content is what converts that traffic into sales. And you need to do both in order to have a successful, happy business that wants to keep paying you. And so I entirely agree that you have to focus on content quality at some point, and not all SEOs do. They're too busy trying to get the traffic part of the funnel sorted out.
I love everything that you just said. So basically what I put in the third bucket is the stuff that I call irrelevant, old or outdated, thin or duplicate, like really the stuff that we don't need, like cheap blog posts that we wrote a few years ago, part of our business or branches of our product that are not in business anymore, etc. So this is stuff where I'm really like ruthless and I think we should get rid of. In terms of what you said, pages that have zero traffic, but they actually are crucial for the business, are crucial for the target audience. I would say in most cases, it's probably, as you said, misses search intent, doesn't have the right on-page SEO. It's like medium quality. So that those are the ones that we want to be improving. So I'm totally on board with that strategy. And I think, and we can discuss about this in the group because I'd like to hear your opinion as well, but also with the big kind of like core algorithm updates of the last 2 years and kind of like some pages bouncing around a lot and then page one changing a lot, is we need to kind of like rework our pages more often, and sometimes even specifically after algorithm updates, because if page one has changed because Google thinks something else should be served and your page is just not relevant anymore in terms of the type of content that you're serving, then you just need to redo it. And that's your way how you can make it back. Cool. Okay, I'll stop sharing. I feel I'm all alone here on the stage, but looking forward to having Red jump on, or you guys coming back.
I was just trying to jump back in.
Are there more slides, or are we into the Q&A part?
I've got my slides, so I'll just run quickly through them. That was really great presentation, Viola. Thanks for showing all that. I'll try to take over the screen sharing now. If I can do it.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, go. I go all in full screen mode.
Perfect. The logic we have that now Red can explain to you the more algorithm-based, crawler-based, technical background of all the things that I just said.
Yeah, exactly, Viola. So you mentioned so many important things, and I usually start with what you said at the top of the sales funnel. I start educating people, and the thing is, Google algorithm overall is bloody huge. It's so big that sometimes we focus on so many different things, but we're forgetting the basics. So, and what I'd like to do today is to actually bring on a few basic things from the algorithm and show you how that works in terms of the relevance, how Google understands the relevance, and where is it taking this stance from. And then I'll circle back into the crawl budget and show you a few examples of the index management problems that I'm dealing with and how to solve them. So without further ado, let me just say who I am, because I'm sure there are people who've never met me and are wondering who is this bloody guy who's unknown and is trying to show off some of his knowledge. So I am currently the CDO at SEO Digital, and actually I am affiliated with a few other brands that you may have heard my name associated with, but they're all owned by one holding company. In total, I would say I oversee several hundred campaigns overall, and have done SEO for like thousands, like probably like tens of thousands of websites in my career. Now, I really like to present myself as someone who is very technical, but also is able to bring in this creative, almost artistic element into the strategy. I've spoken at Chiang Mai SEO, so you know, some of you may have seen me there as well. And my background, which I unfortunately don't do much nowadays, is software engineering and programming. So you can say I'm a tech geek. But this also allows me to look at the algorithm from a slightly different perspective. Now, everyone knows that Google has something like index, right? And in fact, it's actually, technically speaking, an inverted index. The difference between, or how it works and how it looks like, I would like to explain on an example. So if you could imagine a cookbook, it usually has like all the different ingredients at the end of it in like a little index, and that index gives you basically a page number where this ingredient was mentioned. So I've got a couple of ingredients. I've got like chocolate, I've got chocolate cake, and obviously the page is there. So this is the association between the actual term and the document, or a page, or in this case a recipe, where this term is being found. And obviously this inverted index already somehow keeps relevance, because obviously it attributes the terms to documents, right? Now, so it does it slightly more effectively. It uses something called tokenization, right? And all in all, it's basically sorting a string of text, which is a word or a sentence or a phrase, into its most basic components. And those three examples that I have here, obviously the first one is SEO is great, so it can be tokenized into individual words that I call the operation that I call the wordification, which is a completely made up phrase by myself. Now, the other example, optimization, so that's one word, and obviously the token of that would be the core of the word, which is probably something around optimize, and then Asian as in the action, or in the last example, optimize, and add optimized as a passive voice. Now, since Google keeps it in the index, and it keeps all those tokens and all those words and attributes them to things in the index, it actually creates vectors. It creates matrices first, and then vectors, right? And speaking mathematically, vector is actually a very easy thing to correlate and build relevance on top of, right? It will make a little bit more sense in a couple of slides, but just the operation of vectorization of words or sentences, I'm explaining on a little example here. So I've got those four sentences, and the thing is, Google skips, while it's tokenizing the words, it skips all the most popular words and stop words, like sometimes like personal forms and stuff like that. So I removed them from here just so it's easier to show. And I've placed them, I've placed all the words here and attributed which sentence and how many times they appear in, right? And just by looking at this this table here, this matrix here, we can see that mathematically speaking, if we compare the first row and the last row, we can see that the stuff is repeating quite often. So we could already kind of sense or kind of point into the direction that those sentences are actually quite similar, obviously technically and algorithmically speaking.
Hey, Red, can I comment on that last slide really quickly?
Okay, sure, yeah.
I love this slide. The one thing I would add for our audience is that those words don't actually need to even be words. If you created a page and had a sentence that says, I love to eat JL39QR765 cake, Google will actually vector that imaginary term as well. And that's actually the foundation of how we do SEO testing, is creating keywords that nobody else uses and then seeing how Google behaves with them.
Yeah, precisely. And also one of the reasons why Kyle was able to rank lorem ipsum, website completely filled with lorem ipsum for medium difficult term, actually, right? And another thing, I don't want to go off a tangent here too much, but in Google world, everything, absolutely everything is a vector, right? If you read the description of RankBrain and how Google people actually described and keep describing RankBrain, it operates within a vector space of entities, right? And the thing is, those entities are also basically vectors, but multi-dimensional vectors. So obviously, it's a vector of vectors, so to speak, right? So I really wanted to just use a simple example. It may be a lot more complex than that, and we could probably have like another 5 webinars about vectors in Google Universe overall. But yeah, you're very right that basically everything might be a vector in Google. Right now, so the simple example here, we get 2 completely distinct words, but if we put them together, obviously we have, oops, go back. Obviously, we have a milkshake, a chocolate milkshake, which is a phrase that makes a completely different kind of sense, right? Now, so with all this, I'm trying to the point I'm trying to make is that with all this at the very basis of how Google works internally, we can actually, so when we tokenize and turn everything into vectors, we can actually start doing math on all of that, right? And I use a little example here where I have a set of capital cities and countries. And let's say that we know that capital city of Russia is Moscow, and we actually need to find out what's the capital city of Portugal. Right, so how would we do that? Using the math on vectors, we would go Moscow minus Russia plus Portugal, and it would actually return Lisbon, right? Because that's how it actually calculates how those words as vectors, as tokens, are actually associated with each other, right? Now, going further, this is, again, like I said, the basis of RankBrain initially, but obviously BERT released quite recently, which is an aid to machine learning and model that allows better natural language processing. This is the basis of all that as well, right? And this is why and how it actually puts together stuff like people also ask, right, where it finds similarities between words and between sentences, and actually it is able to find questions that people were asking that were very similar to what you've just asked, and puts them into the search results, so you can explore this topic even farther, right? And similarly, related searches. Although I remember reading a patent about how related searches are actually combined by Google, and what Google does, it's also quite interesting because it obviously uses understanding what you typed in as a query, but, and this is what Viola said about user intent, Google looks at how did you justify, how did you play around with the query to actually find what you were looking for, right? And based on those combinations that you're doing, how do you actually improve your query to get what you were looking for, to get that intent that you were looking for, based on those combinations is actually putting together the related searches, because it kind of wants to suggest you that, hey, so other people that searched for this exact term that you've just searched for actually changed it slightly because they had a slightly different intent, and maybe one of these that are here would fit your intent as well. Right now, and I'm sure you're already wondering, okay, so it's all fine, Google algorithm, how it understands, how it sees words and sentences and stuff, but where and why in all this is crawl budget or index management in general, right? And the question is, the answer is actually really simple. It's pruning, right? Now, think about this. And by the way, I had to quickly steal this image from Forestrypedia. And this is actually how you really prune the tree, if some of you are into gardening. But the thing is, pruning, what I mean by pruning here has two meanings, right? On one hand, pruning in terms of obviously cleaning up your own website and your index and all that to preserve crawl budgets, and basically as the result to achieve everything that Viola was talking about. But on the other hand, think about this from Google's perspective, right? Because it wants to limit the resources that it spends on the website. That's why it introduced the crawl budget, right? But even though it does have this crawl budget that limits all that, it also tries to quickly understand what your website is about. So if it gets to a part of the website that it already knows or can predict easily that is going to be very similar to what Google's already crawled, what it's going to do, it's going to just cut off and prune that whole section, right? Because it will crawl it later on, probably, unless it's like completely shit. But overall, it will just limit the resources crawling. It will be interested in something that Google's not yet seen in your website, right? And this is from preserving Google's resources on their end, another type of pruning, just cutting off what they already know and going to stuff that they don't know, right? And obviously, with all this pruning on Google's side, you don't want to end up being like this, right? So you don't want to end up having Google just see, a few pages and everything else is like duplicated or something. But we'll get into that in just 1 second. Now, so circling back to relevance and understanding and looking at the website as a whole. And I could talk about ways how to improve relevance, but I'd rather talk about breaking stuff, right? So just to give you examples of what not to do, right? Some of them won't be very new to you because you've probably heard about all of them, but I would like to quickly go through some of these as examples because they're quite interesting, right? So obviously on content side, we have content cannibalization, and I actually distinct content cannibalization from keyword cannibalization in terms of let's say when you have content cannibalization, you would have review pages about a product, and then you would talk about the type of the product. So let's say you have, standing desks, right? And you're reviewing or microphone, and you're reviewing a specific type of a microphone on one page, but then you still write about microphones in general, right? And you do that for all the pages where you review, where you're doing those microphone reviews, right? So it's not really good because, you know, of course it's relevant, of course it's topical, but Google is more interested to actually get that one microphone's review instead of, you know, that microphone's review and on top of that stuff about microphones in general, right? So this is content cannibalization, basically talking the same stuff, even in a unique way, even in an interesting way, but somewhere where it doesn't really belong. And right, like Viola rightly noticed, that would also, if you think about it, that would also mess up your search intent, right? Because if someone wants to read a review of, I don't know, a Rode microphone, they probably don't want to read about all the stuff about microphones that, you know, some of them are on tripods and stuff like that, right? Okay, duplication, talking crap on the pages. So again, if you're reviewing, let's say, software like Pop, and all of a sudden you say, oh, this helps me in SEO, and you go off a tangent and talk about SEO in this article, this is basically talking crap. Like, just stick to the point, because this is the user intent that I want you to cover, right? Empty pages, soft 404s, which are quite similar. Pagination. Why do I say that pagination can mess up your relevance? It's not pagination itself, but how do you execute pagination, right? And I observe quite often that a lot of e-commerce websites, when they do have pagination, when they do have a category page, they add a content on top of the category page or somewhere in the sidebar, just to, you know, have a little bit of content on that category page. But what they then do on each and every pager of that pagination, so page 2, 3, etc., they leave the same content, right? On one hand, you could say, you know, on the scale of an e-com shop, it's not really that important. But on the other hand, why duplicate it, right? You've already got it on the main category page, so you probably don't need this content on the paginate on the pages, right? And I'd like to do a test one day to actually compare that, but it's like very difficult to do just an individual factor of that. Maybe you guys could help me design a test like this, where I would just test content on pages. But yeah, we may talk about it later. Okay, forms and thank you pages. They also create problems. Like, why would you have something indexed when you're just thanking your users, right? No one needs to find it in Google, so just remove them, right? Keep this index nice and clean, right? From the structure and technical perspective, keyword cannibalization. This is probably something that everyone knows. So we have two competing pages trying to rank for one keyword, and like Viola said, you can combine them or remove one. There are many ways you can approach that depending on the case. You've got bloated index. That should probably be under crawl budget, because overall index bloat is created by a bunch of things like session IDs, which are, by the way, probably my favorite. Like, when I learned PHP and programming, like probably like 18 or 20 years ago, I first heard about session IDs and how to remove them from URLs. And I keep seeing those session IDs bloody indexed in Google all the time. Like, this is just not good housekeeping.
Yeah. My favorite example of messing up that type of thing is on one online retailer's website. I went and looked through their Apache weblogs, and you could see Googlebot going product by product through all of the categories, adding and removing the products to and from the cart.
I love them too.
And I know that faceted navigation and those cart forms, when they're built out as links, people don't realize that Googlebot follows those. Do you see lots of examples like that in your work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Faceted navigation, it's so good for the users and it can be done right, but it's, for some reason, it's technically so difficult for so many developers and so many even big brands. And by the way, I've got a slide where I actually show that problem on one of the bigger brands in retail fashion. So bear with me. And actually, one of the most popular, again, like HTTP and HTTPS, when you have both indexed under your domain. And you can say, and Google, by the way, says that they're actually smart enough to distinguish these and pick the canonical for you. But this is actually, in my opinion, what SEO's job is, to actually serve stuff to Google on a silver platter. So Google doesn't need to, take this effort and decide for you, right? Now, and by the way, I really like ASOS as a brand, but also I really like them as an example of things that you shouldn't do within your e-com website. I've got literally 2 examples, but 2 that are very relevant to the presentation. So on every single product on ASOS, you've got a content, a little description of a brand, right? And this is where I say, don't duplicate it internally, right? So what I did here, I just found this random product, copied that little description, did site asos.com and pasted it there. It already came up with 470 results. And you might argue that for a brand like ASOS, where they have like probably 11 million pages indexed, that's not a big deal, right? And of course, that's true. And also, what's also true, bigger brands that have a lot of traffic, are well known and have this authority, they would get away with a lot more things. But this is to visualize that this might be a problem that actually can mess up your relevance within your site if it's much smaller than ASOS and it's a much smaller brand. And just another example, this is a site asos.com, in URL colorway ID. And I've noticed they add that to so many products. And I don't even know where it comes from, to be honest with you, because when you actually visit a URL, it's clean, but then it kind of changes into URL with all these little parameters. And guess what? They all get indexed, right? So now they've got like 113,000 URLs indexed with this parameter and without. So again, good housekeeping and looking after your index, right? That's a really important thing. Now, just almost lastly, this is a screenshot from Google Search Console, and I'm pretty obsessed with the section coverage, because it shows you exactly what Google found within your website, especially when you look at the excluded part. It shows you exactly what Google found within your website, and it shows you exactly how many URLs of that issue it found, and then you can just go and quickly look through them, right? Some of these that I really like are crawl anomaly. So this is where Google receives a different HTTP response code than it expected, or it just reaches something that it didn't think it should be under that URL, which again shows you that Google tries to analyze and understand your website and then comes up with all these anomalies that it finds. And that example duplicated without user selected canonical. So Google found that some of these pages are duplicated, but there's no canonical. So it probably applied the canonical on its own. So then again, you should probably look at those URLs and canonicalize them yourself, or remove or combine or something else. And before mentioned, soft 404s, and one more down the bottom here, which I didn't highlight actually. So it's duplicate. Google chose different canonical than user. So this is where Google says blatantly, hey man, you're wrong. This isn't the right canonical tag. This isn't the right canonical page. I chose a different one that it's better. And obviously it's worth looking at those and trying to understand why would Google choose something else than you actually are trying to rank or point at in terms of the canonical and stuff. Now, I'm open to any questions. I'd be happy to run a few site searches for you if you have anything in mind. And yeah, let's discuss.
Thank you, Rad. We have a few questions in the queue for both of you. One is someone asks, your SEO book is super impressive. Well done with that. Curious what you're planning with it. What are your success metrics on it? So tell us about this book. We haven't heard about your book yet.
Yeah, most of the screenshots, other than the one with pruning, which like I said, stole, are actually from the SEO textbook that we've released. And Viola has actually been kind enough to do videos for it. So it's an SEO book that we want to angle and focus on the algorithmic stuff, right? So it's not simple things like, hey, you need to do your heading optimization, make sure there's one H1, and optimize your page titles and stuff like that. We actually start with why does it matter in terms of the algorithm, similarly to what I did with the presentation today, and then we actually show why and how this should be done properly, so algorithm should essentially like it.
And I think probably one thing that's worthwhile mentioning, this is actually a free resource. So we're releasing a chapter every week, but you can start checking it out now, which is sometimes also uncommon. A lot of people have paid courses, but that's a resource that you can start checking out.
Where can they find that?
They go to susodigital/textbook, susodigital.com/textbook.
Yeah, I'll drop a link in the Q&A or chat thing if you don't mind, guys.
Oh, please do. All right, so Viola, if you know how to keyword tune properly up with topics, is that correct? Is that a natural outcome, or is it harder than that?
I think it's kind of like a chicken and egg question. So the way I like to think about this is usually some people from the content team or from the client side, they will have some ideas in terms of like stuff that they do want to write about. And then I, as an SEO, will have some ideas that I would like to cover based on my keyword research. And then basically once I've selected the few topics, then I do another analysis to just figure out whether or not this should be one page or separate pages. And this is where I go more into the page one analysis, seeing the subtopics that are being covered, etc. Basically making I would say keywords, how would I put this? I don't think it really matters which way around you do it, as long as you cross-check your ideas with page one and determine whether that stuff should be on the same page or whether that should be new pages.
So, Red, changing topics here, how would you explain vectors in one or two sentences?
A bunch of numbers. That's probably not the best explanation.
Well, if you had to explain it to Clint, who is notorious for just wanting a down-to-earth explanation, what does Clint need to walk away knowing?
I'm obviously kidding. So it's probably best to use an example. So if you were to describe me as a person in a vector kind of way, you would say that obviously I've got some attributes, and those attributes have values, right? So let's say my attribute first name would be Rad, my attribute last name would be Polsek, my attribute gender would be male, etc., right? Profession SEO, right? Apparently. And this is the vector. So it's just a bunch of attributes and their values that describe a certain entity.
Thank you. One of the questions got nuked before I could read it. It was about crawl budget, and there's this belief that the more external links you have, the more crawl budget you have. Is that just a myth, or is it really that simple? It kind of looked to me like there was more to it about the structure and the problems Google finds. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely more to it than just external links. And by the way, obviously, I presume it's just been worded this way, but whenever I hear more external links, it kind of gives me a little craves, because I don't like people think in terms of, oh, I just need to have more external links, right? It's not about more external links, right? With the crawl budget, apparently it does help when you have higher authority, right? And usually you get higher authority with links, right? But let's be honest, with good links, right? It's not just enough to go out and spam some forums. You actually need to earn some links that are relevant, that actually show Google that your stuff is worth it, right? But then again, if you still have empty pages and duplicated stuff and stuff that Google will just despise, then I wouldn't think focusing on link building when you have so much more to do on site would be the best allocation of your resources.
And talking about category page issues with regards to pagination, what do you think is the best method? Is it just rel prev next, which Google has been claiming is deprecated for a long time? What do you need to do? Because I know from an online retail point of view, an online store will get a product, and let's say it's that pink ribbon bracelet again. That'll go in the jewelry top level category. That'll go in the bracelet subcategory. That'll potentially go in the new arrivals category. That'll potentially go in the popular products category, and so on. And oftentimes, you can get the same product in dozens of categories, and each of those categories has dozens of pages with unique URLs because of parameters and whatnot. How do you organize all that?
I think it's a great question, and one that we should probably tag team with Viola, because I would say you have to find a balance between what's best for your users and what's best for the search engine, right? Overall, from the technical perspective, it's not bad that you have the same product in multiple categories, as long as obviously this one product doesn't have the category name in the URL, because then you're risking that it will have like all these different category names and create a bunch of duplicated URLs, right? Overall, categories are created to categorize stuff, right? As the name suggests, right? So it's fine to have products under jewelry and then bracelets when you narrow things down. And that also helps to achieve relevance, helps with relevance, right? Because if you're narrowing stuff down, then Google sees that this category about, bracelets, and then maybe with a filter pink, which I wouldn't actually suggest allowing to index, by the way, is is great for the user, and it makes sense, right? And it's very relevant to this set of products that you have, right? Now, just in terms of pagination itself, I have no reason to disbelieve Google that, they're ignoring rel prev next for ages now. I still use it. However, I don't focus on this. I don't go, oh, you have to implement it because it's bad if you don't, because a lot of other search engines may also use that hint, and you might benefit off of it, right? So there's nothing wrong with it. I'd like to implement that. I just usually allow Google to index pages, right, and structure the information architecture within the site in the way so it benefits the users, and at the same time it doesn't create like thousands of pages, right? Because then it means you should probably narrow something down at some point.
And part two of that question was asking your opinions of infinite scroll for categories. Is that a cure-all, or is it also, filled with problems and issues?
I would say from my experience, it's filled with errors and issues and problems and stuff like that, because although it can be done right, very rarely I would say it is actually done right. Okay, and I'm thinking obviously from Google perspective, because that's my piece of cake, right? But Viola, you'll probably agree with that. Whenever you're viewing an infinitely scrolling page, and then you find a product that you like, and you click into that product, and then you're like, oh yeah, I don't really like it, and you click back, and you're at the very beginning of the page of the category, and then you have to scroll through all of this again. This is just purely and simply bad user experience, and thing that really pisses me off as a user, for example.
Well, one thing that I want to add on that note in terms of like user experience is, I think with a lot of like, it's different probably with a lot of like big websites like Booking.com for hotels or Amazon for e-commerce, etc. They have their own set of issues and many things that you talked about. But let's say we're like a medium big website, and we also might be running on some of the popular CMS like Shopify or WordPress and all this stuff. Like a lot of people, the way those CMS produces categories is just a list sorted by date, right? And then you have the blog roles or the products sorted by date. So at the bare minimum, I would say, as someone conversion focused, I should use my product category page in e-commerce and sort them by most popular, and not by date or name or anything like that. So that's a quick thing. And then when we talk about categories for content, I would really encourage you to start thinking about category pages as a hub page or library, and not so much as a blog roll based on date, because that's just not useful. And this is not necessarily how people want to read and find information. So if there's like certain subtopics that you're covering, and actually clustering your content like that, and using your category page as an opportunity to create units that belong together, that makes sense, and display it like that. You might be getting rid of some of the pagination WordPress category pages, and also it makes more sense for the user to search to like a library, right? You go down a hallway about a certain topic, and it doesn't make sense for the books to be sorted simply by date.
Mm-hmm.
And one last question: would you keep your ecom products as 404s, or always redirect to a top level category? In my past experience, I would answer that question with a question: do you expect that product to come in stock again? And if so, you just make it 404 or ideally 410, so it de-indexes. Because if you're, for example, a jewelry store and you have sterling silver amethyst bracelets, you probably carry 15 of them, and all of them target that same keyword. if you 410 on that cannibalization, the next in-stock product takes its place in Google, which is an awesome store hack. I don't know why platforms don't take advantage of that. It puts cannibalization to work for you. And then if it's sold out and it's never coming back, then I would redirect to the most appropriate alternative and canonicalize to that URL. What do you guys think about those issues? How do you handle them?
I think 100% on point. It's one of the stupid, for me, it's a stupid, it depends consultant answer that the client needs to get.
Yeah. I've seen so many ways that different brands approach these. Some of them, even if the product is never coming back, some of them actually keep that product on just so they can show a nice for optimized 404 page, obviously optimized for the conversion, right? So they suggest different products and stuff like that. They don't really care that much about the SEO, which you, Ted, rightly said. It's best to redirect it from the SEO perspective if it's never coming back. And it's also sort of good for the user, but a lot of brands that I've seen and that I've worked with, they were quite particular about keeping the 404 page with suggested products for, say, a period of 2-3 weeks or a month, and then redirecting it or just removing it.
Well, thank you. Kyle, Clint, do you have any follow-on questions?
Follow-on statement. We talked about, I was last week, SEO this week, about the category pages, and there's a template in there. And that carries on with the conversation Ted and I followed before too. So I don't know if if you guys needed any more third-party validation that you should be leveraging those category pages. And Viola and Rad have certainly given it to us at that point.
Yeah, I could probably do a whole episode on nothing but category pages. There are so many cool tricks to making those perform, and they're notoriously thin. And my two favorite category tricks, just to make sure everyone walks away with a nugget, increase the number of products per page. It instantly bulks up the page. So if it's too thin, go from 20 products to 100 products per page. The second trick, add a short summary of 2 keyword-rich short sentences for each product. Add that to the product token, and at 100 products per page, you just added 200 keyword-rich sentences to each product page. Bingo. So tell everyone one last time where they can get that SEO book. There's already interest on YouTube for it. So let's reiterate the URL.
Sure, it's susodigital.com/textbook. And we've just released the first module. The next ones are coming weekly.
Awesome. And thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us this talk on crawl budget and indexing. I look forward to having more research in this area in the future. It's an awesome topic. Any final thoughts from anyone?
Very nicely done, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome. We'll have to have you back on to talk about other chapters in the book, because the book covers a lot of different topics, more than just keyword research and indexing. I mean, how many chapters are in the book?
13, 14,
Yeah.
I think. It's like 100,000 words. So
Wow,
it's pretty.
okay. So
I can tell you that Red and his team are crazy and beyond that. This is like the longest thing in terms of like SEO text that you can probably see that just casually gets released over the period of like a few weeks.
Nice. Is it going to be published, or is it just like an ebook?
We're not planning on publishing it as yet, basically what it was, we were building a new website and we were like, oh yeah, let's do some content marketing. And that seemed like a good idea to also show it a slightly different approach, more algorithmic as well.
And you mentioned before, is this correct? The book is totally free. You're not charging for it.
Yep, it's free.
So you're just helping people out of the kindness of your hearts.
And want to rank in Google for some SEO related terms.
Nice.
When we release
Well, you got to
this
pay
piece,
the bills.
finally.
I can't blame you for paying the bills, but that's great. It's a free resource with a lot of information, both technical and
a
business.
bunch of like quizzes and stuff like that. So I think for everyone who likes to get technical and nerdy, it's a really good read.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. With that, we'll return to networking, and I want to thank everyone for joining the show. If anyone has any follow-on questions that we missed or didn't come in time, how can they reach you to ask their questions?
Well, for example, I am at Viola at flow-seo.com or my all-time favorite social platform, LinkedIn.
You can find me on most of the major social platforms at radpalushak or rad@susadigital.com.
And is an emergency backup, if either of those two don't work, you can also find Viola on IMG, internetmarketing.gold, if you're in the community. Rad, are you in the community yet?
Yes, I've joined quite recently, but yes.
Awesome. So you can also find them in IMG. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Right. Thank you.